The most dangerous moment of the Cold War wasn't when America was afraid to act. It was the moment America started believing it always should. Because fear can restrain a superpower, but confidence can liberate it. So here's a question that sounds wrong the moment you say it out loud. What if losing the Cold War saved the world? Not losing on paper. Not the Soviet Union winning, but losing something else. The belief that power always knows what it's doing. Because history shows something uncomfortable. Nations don't become reckless when they're weak. They become reckless when they feel justified. And the Cold War produced the most seductive justification imaginable. A story where the right side wins, where history itself hands you a moral license, where every future intervention can be framed as prevention, liberation, responsibility. And if you believe that story too deeply, you stop asking the one question that keeps the world alive. What happens if we're wrong? We usually tell the Cold War like it has a clean ending. Democracy defeated communism. Freedom outlasted tyranny. The West held the line. The Soviet Union collapsed. End of story. But that story is tidy in a way history rarely is. Because the Cold War wasn't one war. It wasn't one battlefield. It wasn't even one strategy. It was a decades-long experiment in managing fear. Fear of escalation. Fear of miscalculation. Fear that one wrong decision could end everything. And the strange thing about that experiment is this. It only works if doubt survives. Because once you believe history proved you right, you stop fearing your own decisions. And that's when restraint starts to look like weakness. When a country wins a war like World War II, it doesn't just win militarily. It wins morally. It becomes the author of the new rules. It decides what stability looks like. It defines which actions are justified. Sometimes that confidence creates order. But in a nuclear world, confidence is volatile. Because confidence removes the one thing that slows a superpower down. Second thoughts. If you believe your previous use of power was righteous, then every future crisis starts looking familiar, solvable, manageable, necessary. Victory doesn't just end enemies. It ends hesitation. This is where Vietnam matters. Not as a morality tale, not as a symbol of guilt, but as a psychological rupture. Vietnam didn't prove America was weak. It proved that power could fail. Not tactically, politically. You could win battles and still lose legitimacy. You could deploy overwhelming force and still fail to shape outcomes. That lesson mattered because it rewired decision-making. After Vietnam, American leaders didn't stop intervening, but intervention became harder to sell, harder to escalate, harder to sustain. Every president inherited a question that hadn't existed before. What if this becomes another Vietnam? That question slowed decisions. And in a nuclear world, slowing down is survival. Vietnam didn't just change foreign policy. It changed the relationship between power and the public. Trust fractured. Media turned adversarial. Protest normalized. Skepticism became patriotic. From a moral standpoint, people argue endlessly about whether that was good. But strategically, its effect is clear. It raised the political cost of action. Leaders now had to justify not just what they could do, but why they should do it. That friction mattered, because friction creates pauses, and pauses create off-ramps. Not because leaders become wiser, but because delay allows fear to re-enter the room. Now imagine a different Cold War. One without Vietnam as a warning. No humiliating defeat. No national trauma. No cultural memory of overreach. In that world, America doesn't just feel strong. It feels correct. Interventions feel easier to justify. Escalation feels logical. Limits feel unnecessary. Because if force worked before, why wouldn't it work again? This doesn't create a safer Cold War. It creates a faster one, where every crisis becomes a test of resolve. Every hesitation becomes a liability. Every local conflict becomes global. And speed is the enemy of restraint. Here's the part we rarely confront. The Cold War didn't end with mutual restraint. It ended with asymmetry. One side collapsed. The other remained. And with that came something new. A world where doubt faded. A world where power no longer had a peer to fear. A world where restraint had to be self-imposed. History suggests that's the most fragile kind. Because when doubt disappears, intervention stops feeling dangerous. It starts feeling routine. And routine is how escalation hides. Restraint isn't always moral. Sometimes restraint is just fear. Fear of failure, fear of backlash, fear of repeating mistakes. But fear can be stabilizing. Some of the safest years of the modern era may have been the years when American power doubted itself most. Not because doubt is noble, but because doubt delays action. And delay, in a nuclear world, saves lives. This doesn't mean defeat is good. It means unchecked confidence is dangerous. So here's the question I want you to sit with. What is more dangerous? A superpower that believes it's right, or a superpower that fears it might be wrong again? Because victory doesn't just end conflicts. It can end hesitation. And hesitation might be one of the last barriers between human error and global catastrophe. So choose. Would you rather live in a world where power always believes it's justified, or a world where power is restrained by the memory of failure? Don't answer with a slogan. Explain the trade-off. Because if you can't explain it, you're not choosing. You're just repeating a story you were handed. And maybe that's the real legacy of the Cold War. Not who won, but what winning taught us. We were allowed to do.